While the Army has completed its study of nerve gas rockets in Kentucky, the Air Force is now beginning to look into what happened into the crash of one of its F-4 fighter planes today in Germany.
The crash occurred near Zweibrucken Air Force Base, where the Kentucky Air National Guard is on maneuvers. 18 News reporter Tim Weldon is over there on a trip, and he is having this live report now from Zweibrücken, West Germany. Tim?
Guten Abend, Amy.
Guten Abend, Tim.
About 10 hours ago, an American Air Force F-4 jet on a routine training mission crashed about 15 miles east of the Zweibrucken Air Base. The plane carried 2 crewmen. Fortunately, they were able to bail out before the crash and received only minor injuries. They've been identified as Captains David Brett of South Carolina and Mark Hefferly of Maryland. The F-4s from Zweibrucken, like the ones you see on your screen here, have been flying in some photo reconnaissance missions with identical F-4s from the Kentucky Air National Guard. The plane that crashed, however, was apparently not taking part in Kentucky Air Guard exercises, and no Kentucky Guardsmen were involved in the crash. I was at the Zweibrucken Air Base when the crash occurred, and along with several members of the Kentucky Air National Guard, we were among the first on the scene. It crashed in a wooded area, and the wreckage was strewn over several hundred feet. Apparently, it exploded on impact. Of course, I'm here covering the Kentucky Air National Guard's 2 weeks of war maneuvers, and we'll have complete details after we return to the United States in about a week and a half. From Zweibrucken, West Germany, I'm Tim Weldon, 18 News.
Before you disappear into the West German evening there, Tim, let me ask you a question. This is the second time in the past few months this has happened in Zweibrucken, is it not?
Yes, Bob. An Air Force spokesman said that the F-4s have had an unusually good safety record, and those were his words, although quite a number of the F-4s, I understand, were lost over in Vietnam. But there was a crash here at Zweibrucken last November, but like Dave's crash, both crew members were able to bail out last November also.
And I think one last question, Tim. Are all of the Guards personnel and you having at least some kind of a good time in West Germany while you're over there on maneuvers?
Oh, it's wunderbar. This is like a fairy tale city. And this weekend, the Air National Guard, and hopefully I'll be able to also, we're going to have a 3-day weekend where we'll go to different parts of Europe, France, Switzerland, Luxembourg. It's going to be a wonderful weekend, I think, for all of us.
Well, Tim, it's a very difficult assignment, but somebody had to do it. Somebody, and we really appreciate the fact that you offered to and volunteered your services. Boy, we appreciate that.
We look forward to having you back also. Maybe you'll come back.
I don't know. I think I'll have to, but I love it over here, too.
Guten Abend, and we thank you very much. That's Tim Weldon reporting from Germany. Next up, Governor...
Well, in New York City, they are still sweeping up the cans and the confetti from the big birthday party over the Liberty weekend. The 4th of July is a truly American tradition, but it is not confined to our native soil. 18 reporter Tim Weldon's in West Germany, where the Kentucky Air National Guard is taking part in military exercises, and he discovered Independence Day is every bit as special for Americans living on the other side of the Atlantic.
4 months ago, Airman Tim Brueggemann of Covington left his old Kentucky home and arrived at Zweibrucken, West Germany. Brueggemann is one of more than 3,000 GIs stationed here. He told me Germany is nice, but it's not home.
I miss Kentucky. Oh, I miss it bad, the hills and just sitting out and talking with family and everybody else. But Germany itself is a nice country. It rains a lot up here. We're on a mountain, but overall it's pretty nice.
Like many of the GIs at Zweibrücken, this was the first time Brueggemann spent the 4th of July outside the United States. Typically the most patriotic day on the calendar for Americans, it's no different here. The 4th of July began with the kind of festivities Americans are used to in the States. Food, music, games, and here in Germany, especially beer. This was a chance for servicemen and women to shed their military uniforms for civilian clothes and enjoy a day with the family on base. For some, it was the chance to throw a wet sponge at their commanding officers or even have their superiors thrown in the stockade for a few minutes. It gave Independence Day a whole new meaning.
You know, some of the GIs around here even had me arrested. The charge, having too much fun. Well, I guess if that's an arresting offense around here, I'd have to plead guilty as charged.
The day ended on a patriotic note with fireworks lighting up the West German skies. And just like back home, it provides a special feeling in the hearts of these soldiers and their families, maybe even more so than a 4th of July would back home.
You realize more how much America means to you when you're overseas in comparison to when you're within the confines of our country. The feeling overall is a lot closer to the American people over here, because we all know that we're over here to protect our interests.
I guess there's some things that being 4,000 miles away from home can't take away. Patriotism is one. From Zweibrücken, West Germany, this is Tim Weldon, 18 News.
Thousands still hover in Ohio evacuation.
More than 300 Kentucky Air National Guard members bade farewell to West Germany over the weekend and arrived back in Louisville after 2 weeks of war games. Our Tim Weldon, who traveled with the Guard, will chronicle the trip in a series of reports this week and next. Tonight he begins by explaining that just getting to Germany was no easy matter.
1 o'clock a.m., the Kentucky Air National Guard base in Louisville. One last briefing before the flight crews start the engines on their F-4 jets and take off. Destination, a NATO base in Zweibrucken, West Germany. They've been over their flight plan so many times they can repeat it in their sleep, and probably do sometimes. But pilots and navigators share a few anxious moments watching a line of thunderstorms moving into their flight path. Finally, a pep talk from Colonel Pete Snyder, and a few assurances that everything will be okay.
Major Sands and I and a few other people on the command post are going to do everything, including moving heaven and earth, if that's what it takes, to get you off the ground in a safe and orderly fashion.
2 o'clock a.m., the F-4 sit idly by on the tarmac. Restless pilots check and recheck everything for any last-minute problems. This is the calm before the storm. At 3:10 a.m., the first wave of F-4 jets break the silent Louisville night. Balls of fire dance out of the plane's afterburners until all that's left are tiny dots off in the distance, and then they disappear completely. The flight over the Atlantic becomes an endurance test for the flight crew. I'm sitting in the cockpit of one of the F-4 jets. As you can see, it's extremely confining. For 9 hours, the crew is strapped to their seats. They can't get up and stretch, can't take a nap. But then they don't seem to mind. After all, the rigors of war training provide few of life's comforts. 14 F-4s took off from Stanford Field. 12 of them were supposed to make the trip to Germany, but you know what's said about the best-laid plans of mice and men. One F-4 developed engine problems and turned back. An error in judgment sent 2 spare planes back to Louisville prematurely. That left the Kentucky Air National Guard with 11 planes, not 12 to use in their war maneuvers. 9 hours and 7 mid-air refuelings later, the F-4s land safely at Zweibrücken Air Base. It's 6 o'clock p.m. German time. Time for a quick welcome.
There you go. Welcome to Zwei.
Thank you.
A bus ride to their hotels and a well-deserved rest. Tomorrow, more on the Guard's welcome and why they're here. This is Tim Weldon, 18 News, Zweibrücken, West Germany.
Welcome.
Much fun was had by all, and a lot of Wiener Schnitzel, he told me. Aren't you eating your heart out over that? I would have flying one of those.
I would have taken that 9 hours with a big old grin on my face. Every minute of it. Well, let's get...
Kentucky's Air National Guard landed in Germany this month, and that marked an important first. A reserve group had never before trained with the regular Air Force troops stationed at Zweibrücken. So when the Bluegrass 123rd arrived, there was a big welcome. Tim Weldon went along and has the story in his series On Guard in Germany.
It was a 9-hour flight without the comforts and conveniences most commercial airlines provide. So when more than 300 members of the Kentucky Air National Guard stepped on German soil for the first time, they were groggy, stiff, and a little sore. But their host at Zweibrücken Air Base had the perfect remedy ready and waiting. A reception in true German fashion, and that usually means drinking beer, a lot of it. Well, you know what they say, when in Zweibrücken.
We're looking forward to working with you very closely. You have an aggressive flying schedule that you intend to accomplish, and we're certainly going to help you to that end.
The welcome extended beyond the 10-foot-high fence that surrounds the Zweibrücken Air Base. One of the first things the Guard did when they arrived was to exchange greetings with the Bürgermeister, or mayor of Zweibrücken.
Wir haben hier in Zweibrücken.
You're going to have a really successful time here mission-wise, but also a very nice stay in our city.
There are 12 United States Air Force bases in West Germany. Zweibrücken is one. There are 3,000 servicemen and women stationed here doing pretty much the same kind of mission the Kentucky Air Guard does on a reserve basis. This is no ordinary trip for the Kentucky Air National Guard, and these are no ordinary visitors for the Air Force in Zweibrücken. This is the first time an Air National Guard unit from the States is trained with the regular forces here in Zweibrücken. The Guard came here to train, but they also came here to prove a point, that while they may be the second team, their flying talents are not second-rate.
We're number one. We've proven it through competitions, through evaluations. We feel that we're good. There's never any doubt that we can fly an airplane. The Guard has always been great in that aspect of it.
Tomorrow, more on the Kentucky Air Guard's war games, plus a first-hand look at what can happen to one of these F-4 jets when something goes wrong. This is Tim Weldon, 18 News, Zweibrücken, West Germany.
Well, we have Brian back. Certainly took more than a tank of gas to get Lexington police officer Steve McVeigh to West Germany. He traveled with the Kentucky Air National Guard, and he took some pictures on the trip. They were not vacation shots. They're pictures that could potentially help the U.S. government in a war. Today in his series On Guard in Germany, Tim Weldon explores a typical flying mission with Steve McVeigh.
We're not in the same airplane.
Steve McVeigh is what the Air Force calls a rear seater. He sits in the back seat of the F-4 jets and takes photographs of enemy targets before mock airstrikes. On this particular day, McVeigh will fly 3 separate missions. It takes a lot of planning, mapping, and classified briefings before he can put on his flight suit and slip into the cockpit of his F-4.
You get a lot of realistic training over here, and as opposed back in the States where you're kind of confined in the low-level corridors. Here, pretty much anything goes.
McVeigh is in the air an hour and a half. When his plane touches down, he's all smiles. Mission completed.
How was it, Steve?
It's a good ride. We had a good job. Did a good job today. Got our targets, and getting ready to go up and do another one.
A debriefing with McVeigh and the other flyers points out what they did right and what they could have done better.
As far as what we set out to accomplish, we accomplished it in a reasonable fashion.
These planes travel at 500 miles per hour on maneuvers, and they're capable of flying much faster. As you can see, there's not much room for error. While the Kentucky Air Guard was in Germany, they got an unplanned and unwanted lesson that war games are not always fun and games. An F-4 from Zweibrücken Air Base crashed in a forest 15 miles east of Zweibrücken. The 2-man crew was lucky. They bailed out before their plane went down.
Air Force officials tell me the F-4s have had an unusually good safety record, but this is the second time in the past 8 months that a Zweibrücken jet has gone down. Last November, an F-4 crashed while on a routine flying mission, but as was the case here, both crew members were able to successfully bail out.
While this was not a Kentucky Air Guard F-4 that crashed, the accident did have a special meaning for the Kentucky flyers.
There is like a camaraderie between the two organizations.
The 32 flyers from Kentucky are aware of the dangers they face, but they say it's worth the risk. The photographs they take are interpreted, and the information can make the difference between the success and failure of a mission. But not all the risk in Germany came from potential air accidents. The Kentucky Air National Guard was also faced with a high threat of terrorism while they were here. More on the precautions they took to prevent that tomorrow. From Zweibrücken, West Germany, this is Tim Weldon, 18 News.
We're going to really shift gears because coming up next, when the Kentucky Air National Guard went to West Germany this month, there was potential danger, not from a possible plane crash or other accident, but from today's most deadly enemy, terrorism. This evening, in his series, On Guard in Germany, Tim Weldon explains what the Air Guard did to get ready for terrorism and what it didn't do.
Last April, a bomb exploded in a Berlin discotheque, killing a United States serviceman. The threat of terrorism has become a way of life for our GIs stationed here in Europe. It follows them home at night like a shadow and returns with them the next morning in the same manner. When the Kentucky Air National Guard arrived here in West Germany, they hoped this 4th of July show would be the only fireworks they'd see while they were here. No fireworks of the terrorist variety. But shortly after they arrived here, an intelligence report warned them that terrorists planned to make a strike someplace on a United States military installation during the 4th of July weekend. For the Kentucky Air National Guard, that meant taking extra security measures to make sure they wouldn't become another terrorism statistic. Many of those precautions were classified, so the Air Guard couldn't discuss them. Others were just common sense.
Don't become obnoxious. Don't get into controversial conversations with the local populace, and just be a good American, a good person.
The 123rd from Kentucky took many precautions to ward off terrorists, but did they go far enough? When I boarded the Air Force plane for the transatlantic flight to Germany, my luggage was not hand-checked nor x-rayed. I didn't have to go through a metal detector like I would at a commercial airport. These boxes are filled with videotapes, but it could just as easily have been a bomb I was putting on the plane, or I could have carried a weapon on board. In either event, the Air Guard probably wouldn't have known until it was too late. Nevertheless, Kentucky Air Guard Brigadier General John Smith doesn't think their security was lax.
But in the military, you know, we knew everybody that we were taking. They've all had background investigations. They're coming to train and do a mission that they've been looking forward to for some time. So we really weren't taking anyone that we were not familiar with.
Luckily, this mission to Germany was a safe one for the Kentucky Air National Guard. The threat of a terrorist attack was not carried out. And when the Guard's planes left Germany for the return trip home, you could almost hear sighs of relief over the blast of the jet engines. From Zweibrücken, West Germany, Tim Weldon, 18 News.
All right, we're going to take a look now.
The Kentucky Air National Guard recently completed 2 weeks of military exercises in West Germany. It was their job to take aerial photographs of enemy targets before mock airstrikes.
Of course, when they weren't taking pictures from the air as flyers, you could find the Guard walking around taking pictures as tourists. Tonight in a series On Guard in Germany, Tim Weldon has a look at the lighter side of the Guard's trip.
It's called Zweibrucken, German for City of Two Bridges, but a more fitting name would probably be the City of Roses. For here in Zweibrücken, you'll find some of the most outstanding rose gardens in all of Europe. Zweibrucken is a city more than 600 years old, but still possessing the characteristics of a city in its infancy. During World War II, Allied forces leveled the city with bombs. All that Zweibrucken had become over the centuries was reduced to piles of charred rubble. Their city destroyed, Germans rebuilt Zweibrucken, and in a way the rebuilding process is still going on today. But it's not homes that are being rebuilt, it's the attitudes toward Americans. Deputy Mayor Jürgen Lambert.
In the younger generations, definitely. Even among the older people who were involved in the war themselves, I cannot say that there are bad feelings still.
Although they're separated by 4,000 miles, Lexington and Zweibrucken are linked by one thing that's very important to both: horse racing. This racetrack in Zweibrücken is the equivalent of Keeneland racetrack back home. And while this one's obviously not as modern, the people here in Zweibrücken are every bit as enthusiastic about horse racing and betting their Deutschmarks on the outcome. More than 300 Air Guardsmen and women from Kentucky spent a special 3-day 4th of July weekend getting in a little R&R, traveling to places they've only seen in travel brochures. Zweibrücken is so centrally located, it's just a few hours' drive to Paris, Austria, Switzerland, and Belgium. The group you see here decided to spend their first Saturday touring some of the medieval castles and palaces in the famed Black Forest of Germany. Tomorrow we'll continue our trip to Germany with the story of a woman from Frankfort, Kentucky who's making Air National Guard history. This is Tim Weldon, 18 News, Zweibrücken, West Germany.
American soldiers are on guard throughout the world, protecting all the interests of the free world. This month, Kentucky's Air National Guard flew to Germany for exercises. Tim Weldon went along and has a profile of a National Guard history maker.
Until this year, to be a National Guard hospital commander meant being a doctor. That gave nurses and other medical staff very little room for promotion. But this year, the National Guard relaxed that rule to allow nurses to command its hospitals. And last month, Verna Fairchild took over the helm of the Kentucky Air National Guard Hospital. She's one of only 4 nurses nationwide who have become hospital commanders so far.
The fact that you're a nurse doesn't mean that you can't lead the whole group. You know, it shouldn't keep you from being able to grow because you're a nurse.
Most of the time, Colonel Fairchild's work is confined to administering a small clinic at the Air Guard base in Louisville. She oversees 54 people who give examinations, drug tests, and treat minor injuries. But in wartime, she could be commanding a hospital on the front lines with 72 hours notice.
I think my anxieties were greater having to come on a deployment so soon after being appointed. It's probably the best thing that could happen. I didn't have time. I just had 1 week to think about it.
On trial by fire.
Right.
Colonel Fairchild has noticed people treat her differently now that she's a history-making nurse. But that didn't keep her from standing in line like everyone else to check in her bags for the trip to and from Germany. From Zweibrucken, West Germany, Tim Weldon, 18 News.
Looks like another hot day on tap. When Tim Weldon traveled with the Kentucky Air National Guard to Germany this month, he thought it would be a little like the TV show MASH. Well, as it turned out, the Guard's war maneuvers were also a little like All in the Family. Tim explains.
Meet the Lundergans, John Sr., his son John Jr., and daughter Diana. The Lundergans are all members of the Kentucky Air National Guard. The elder Lundergan joined 21 years ago. Diana was next, signing up 4 years ago. And last year, brother John followed. During the Guard's war games in Germany, it was John's job to ride a bicycle. He wasn't doing it for recreation, but was actually running film shot from the F-4 jets to be processed. But John's first love is avionics.
I like the electronics. I went down to electronics, Keesler Air Force Base is where I learned electronics. And then I plan on getting an electrical engineering degree from U of L when I get back to school.
On the receiving end of the film is John's sister. Diana processes and interprets the pictures of mock enemy targets. You can bet Dad was glad he was along in Germany to keep an eye on his kids, right?
No, I don't bother them at all. I let them go their way, and if they want to go with me, they go with me. If they don't, then they get to enjoy themselves whatever way they want to do it.
Well, maybe it was the kids who had to keep an eye on Dad. The Lundergans weren't the only ones turning the Air National Guard into a family affair. Technical Sergeant Tim Atwell and Staff Sergeant Sheila Atwell also trained together in Germany, in this case as husband and wife. Tim and Sheila met in the Air National Guard, and last year they walked down the aisle, or in this case the runway, to be married.
We're not at home. We're not in the same building. I'm in the hangar and he has his own building. So we really don't see each other that much through the day, only when we go to lunch.
So far, the Atwells say they've been able to leave any family differences and rivalries at the front door when they come to work, but of course that could change when one of them makes officer and the other one is forced to salute his or her spouse. I'm Tim Weldon, 18 News, Zweibrucken, West Germany.
I don't think you'll mind saluting her.
Nope. Well, Frank says the Kentucky Air Guard is considered one of the top National Guard units in the country. This month, the Guard went to Germany for a series of important activities, including taking part in a mock 3-day war. Tim Weldon has more in his series On Guard in Germany.
Alarm red. In military jargon, it means enemy attack. But here in Zweibrucken, when the red flag went up, the only bombs going off were smoke bombs. And the only planes flying overhead were the Kentucky Air National Guard's own F-4s. But this is as close as the Guard hopes it will ever get to war. Through 3 days of simulated war games called the Salty Nation exercises, the 123rd Tactical Reconnaissance Wing from Kentucky had to guard against snipers, locate unexploded bombs, and check for damage to buildings and vehicles, all under the watchful eye of the evaluation teams.
We have simulated Warsaw Pact forces that are crossing the border. And the scenario takes you through a conventional, if you can call it conventional type scenario of war. And then as the scenario progresses, you get into a worsening situation.
To these men and women, the war was for real. They even had to wear chemical warfare gear. This gave them the appearance of a sort of Darth Vader in fatigues.
Have one of your blankets, sir. We're in building 408.
Anyone who thinks it was easy to do business as usual with the chemical gas mask on has probably never worn one. The suits are hot and very stuffy. Even so, every time the scenario went from alarm yellow to alarm red, the guard would have to put on their chemical mask and keep the planes flying. In the end, it really didn't matter how well prepared the Kentucky International Guard was. You see, the script had already been written, and the story didn't have a very happy ending.
Exercise, exercise. Alarm black, alarm black. Fallout has arrived.
At 1:30 on the third day, the enemy dropped an atomic bomb near the base. Unlike the real thing, the end in this case came not with a bang, but with silence. Everyone was dead. The end of the Salty Nation exercises was a relief to the members of the Kentucky Air National Guard. Many said it was the longest 3 days they had ever experienced.
The gear, the gear itself is very cumbersome, very heavy. It's sometimes difficult to breathe, but that's better than breathing what's outside of the mask. So
tomorrow we'll conclude our series with the report card. How well did the Kentucky Air National Guard perform in Germany? This is Tim Weldon, 18 News, Zweibrucken, West Germany.
All right, thank you, Tim. And now we're going to look at how well those thoroughbreds.
Some military experts think another world war will be fought in Central Europe. And that is why Kentucky's Air National Guard traveled 4,000 miles to Zweibrücken, West Germany this month. The objective, war games and other exercises. Tonight, Tim Weldon concludes his series, On Guard in Germany, with a look at how well the Guard performed.
Playing war games is a little like making a movie. A handful of flyers seem to have the starring roles, but without the help of dozens of maintenance, communications, and other workers, their plane would never get off the ground. The Kentucky Air National Guard exercises tested everyone's abilities to see how well they would perform under warlike conditions. Brigadier General John Smith said his troops responded with an A-plus performance.
I think we accomplished everything that we set out to do. We're a better unit today than we were 2 weeks ago.
In all, the Kentucky Air National Guard flew 200 sorties, or training flights. And what's more, they met their goal with one less aircraft than they planned to bring with them to Germany. Even the regular Air Force officers stationed at Zweibrücken were impressed with their counterparts from the Kentucky Air National Guard.
You started out right, you had good planning, and you came over here to show us how to do it.
Also, when you make a movie, there's a script, and it has to be as realistic as possible. Same thing here. When the last smoke bomb had been set off, the Air Guard members had at least an idea of what it would be like to fight in a war.
The exercise we went through had all of the combat elements integrated into it: chemical warfare defense, surging aircraft, ability to survive. It gave us all we wanted.
And like in the movies, the Kentucky Air National Guard is now better prepared to fight a war in Europe by being on location.
Some people believe that air is air, and flying in one vicinity is the same as flying in all vicinities, but that's not really true.
Some could argue that setting off smoke bombs and calling it a war is a little like drawing a picture of George Washington and calling it a $1 bill. It's a counterfeit war. But it was real enough to make members of the Kentucky Air National Guard realize they never want to experience the real thing. I'm Tim Weldon, 18 News.
Brian's here now for the Ag Weather Report. We've got some good and some bad.
And a Christmas gift came early for our Tim Weldon this year. All he wanted for Christmas was a ride on one of the Kentucky Air National Guard's F4 jets. Last week, the wish came true. Today, Tim begins a two-part report on the flight with a look at preparations for his trip.
Ever since I traveled to Germany last summer to cover the Kentucky Air National Guard's war games, I've been fascinated, almost mesmerized with the sleek F4 jets they use in their reconnaissance missions. The planes can fly at supersonic speeds. They were widely used in Vietnam about 20 years ago, and now the Kentucky Air National Guard has 26 of them. In a wartime situation, the Guard would use the planes to take pictures of enemy targets before air assaults.
In the time of war, we're going to become the eyes of the battlefield commander. He needs to know what's on the other side of the hill and what's coming at him.
When I was asked if I wanted to ride in the two-seat jet, I didn't have to be asked twice. I showed up at the Kentucky Air National Guard headquarters at Standiford Field in Louisville, ready to take the ride of my life.
Hi, how you doing?
What are we going to do? The first thing I had to do was put on my fireproof flight gear. This included a flight suit, boots, gloves, and an anti-G suit I strapped around my legs and abdomen to counteract the gravitational pull from the maneuvers.
So the suit has a series of interconnecting air bladders in it, and with this hose, you plug it into the aircraft. When the aircraft senses it's pulling G's, it pumps air into the suit and physically squeezes the blood back up into your upper extremities to prevent you from blacking out.
After I was familiar with my flight suit, I was put in a training cockpit, buckled up, and taught a lesson I hoped I wouldn't need, how to eject in a mid-air emergency.
Then probably the most important thing to remember is to get your butt, your back, and your head all against the backrest. And that serves to align your spinal column as straight as you can.
And I was shown how to escape if the plane caught fire on the ground. Finally, a pre-flight briefing. It's a highly technical meeting for flight crews. While I didn't understand it, the data is highly critical for a safe flight and the success of a mission.
Weather factors, certain airspace that we need to know about, air traffic control restrictions, the time of flight, rendezvous times that we may have with other aircraft, such as tankers or fighters. So it's the entire planning package.
I've been assigned to fly with Colonel Joe Kotak, Operations Commander for the Kentucky Air National Guard. Tomorrow I'll report on my flight. This is Tim Weldon, 18 News.
He had a ball. He had a marvelous time.
I want to see tomorrow's report today.
We'll go back and take an early peek at it. We're going to have a peek at the weather coming up in just a moment.
Ever since man took to the air, it's been his dream to fly higher and faster. Few machines do it with more thrills than the F-4, which is capable of flying complex maneuvers at supersonic speeds. Tim Weldon recently carried reporter involvement to the extreme and took a rare civilian ride on an F-4. Today, Tim wraps up his two-part report on his ride with a look at what he did and, perhaps more important, what he didn't do.
After going through a short training course, I'm ready to experience the thrills of the F-4 myself. Colonel Joe Kotak will be at the controls of the jet. I'll be in a cockpit directly behind him. He briefs me on what to expect.
I'll be demonstrating to you some of the performance characteristics of the aircraft, how we would defeat any attacks on us since we are unarmed. You asked that question earlier, how we would survive, some of the maneuvering in that aspect.
The F-4s have an outstanding safety record here in Kentucky. I've been told that out of 70,000 hours of flight time, only one time has a flight crew had to bail out. That's reassuring, but there's still a little nervous feeling down in the pit of my stomach. As I sit in my cockpit going over the instructions I was given in my training course, my mind keeps reminding me of my biggest fear, which isn't having to eject, but rather getting airsick. Kotak has taken 19 people on orientation flights, and 17 of those have, to put it mildly, lost their lunch. As our plane taxis from the tarmac to the runway at Standiford Field in Louisville, I feel a little like I'm climbing that first big hill on a roller coaster, knowing it's too late to back out now. After we take off, we begin climbing about 100 feet per second. Within minutes, we're over a restricted airspace in Ohio where Kotak puts me through a series of aerobatic maneuvers. We do rolls, steep banks, and even fly upside down. At one point, our plane carries 4 Gs. That puts intense gravitational pull on my body, causing it to weigh 4 times as much as normal. An anti-G suit I'm wearing forces the blood out of my legs and into my upper body to keep me from blacking out. At one point, Kotak let me fly the F-4 and even do a couple of gentle rolls. Although the trip makes me queasy and a little weak, I'm able to keep my lunch. We're in the air for an hour and 20 minutes. When we land, the parachute comes out to slow down the F-4 on the runway. The best way I can describe the flight is that it was like the ultimate roller coaster ride. We flew as high as 23,000 feet, and within seconds we dropped to 150 feet off the ground. But as much fun as that roller coaster ride can be, it's a nice feeling when it's over and you're back on solid ground again. This is Tim Weldon, 18 News.
I was enjoying it till he mentioned the word roller coaster. Can you imagine plummeting 23,000 feet?
Wouldn't you give anything to go on that, Bob, really?
I was until he said roller coaster.
I know. Jim and I are going to line up, try to be the second and third civilians.
I'll take pictures.
Well, in the meantime, back on Earth we go.
Yeah, meanwhile, back on Earth.